Hello, welcome back to another single malt review. We continue our sojourn through Bangalore with Amrut, the now iconic Indian distiller.
This time it's Amrut Fusion, which the packaging would suggest is a 50%, which sounds promising to begin with. 50% version, no age statement, but the thing here is that it apparently contains 25% of peated malt from Scotland. So I guess that's where the fusion comes in. I'm slightly baffled as to why they did this. My theory, my shot in the dark, where I was like to make one, and I always do, is that this is before they had their own facility to make peated malt. Because, of course, they've got their own... This letter's going to rotate infinitely, isn't it? I'll keep talking. This is probably something they put together before they had their own facility to peat their own malt, because otherwise I don't really know why you would do such a thing.
So possibly as a bit of symbolic bridge building.
I'm really not sure, because they do their own... Bloody hell. Stakes, bear with us. They do their own peated version, which is 100% Indian peat. Ah, here we go. There we go. Conquered it. Thank goodness for fingernails. So I would have to look at the timeline of this, but this might have been a sort of a bridging step when they wanted to test peated whiskey, but they didn't want to go whole hog and
invest in the infrastructure
and invest in their own peating plant, because that's probably a bit of a bit of an ask to put that together when you don't know what it's going to produce. So this might have been a bit of an experiment on their end. So let's see if it worked. Presumably it did, because they now subsequently have gone all the way and produced their own peated malt, so we'll just have to see.
In a vaguely amusing bit of trivia, Amrut is more or less the equivalent word to whiskey. Amrut is the water of life, as Whisky bar, the Gaelic term from which we get whiskey.
Well, there you
So
go.
there's that. Spiritually
This one,
aligned.
I don't even need to read the bottle to know that this is unchill filtered. Of course, it's not coloured either, but just look at it'd be difficult to play on the camera, but you see the sort of foaminess which is just holding on there. That is a very, very oily, very, very thick whiskey. You always know you've got a good one when you pour it, and then the bubbles which form just refuse to go away. And I've sort of got this little committee here, exactly 6 perfectly formed bubbles, and they seem to be there for the duration now. So marvellous body on this one, and I can tell that before even putting my nose in the glass. So initially it's looking pretty good.
Once again, it's 100% bourbon matured, but despite being a young and bourbon matured whiskey, it's got the kind of rich dark gold colour you expect from, say, a 10-year-old sherry matured Scotch. So
Well, gold colour of this depth is something, even from a first fill bourbon, it's something that no matter how old the whiskey might be, you might never ever see in Scotland. It's a testament to the rapid aging. What we sort of did an extremely simple sum and worked out is approximately 5 times the speed in terms of evaporation rate, at any rate.
well, Amrut's distiller is rated about 3 times. The evaporation, sure, is much, much faster than the evaporation of alcohol from a Scotch cask. But the actual maturing of the whiskey, yeah, it's significantly faster though.
Because this depth of gold hue here, you do see this in Scotch, but if you did see it, you'd know that it was a very, very active, and it's usually an incredibly good sign for a 100% bourbon whiskey. But it's not to say that they all even reach this. You might get a 30-year-old first fill bourbon, and it might never reach this colour.
I've had 20-plus-year-old bourbon matured Scotch, which has been very pallid, bordering on almost transparent in comparison to this.
So it's certainly a good environment to pull colour, and hopefully a lot of other goodies with it from the wood.
Ooh.
What those goodies are, we will just have to put our noses in the glass and see.
Well, the original Amrut single malt gave me very strong spiced orange aromas, heavier on the oranges than the spice. And that's staying true here. There's a little bit of peat, but overwhelmingly still orange peel, candied orange peel.
The peat is actually very subtle, and I suppose it would be for only 20%, rather 25% component, and who knows what the peating level of that was. It could have been a low peating level to begin with, so it could be a fraction of a fraction that we're looking at here. But the peat is certainly not the first thing that strikes me. It's really quite nice and gentle for a 50%. It's not prickly in any way, although it's noticeably strong. It's just got that sort of warning of, hey, I'm actually pretty high strength, but not in a particularly aggressive way. The orange, I think, was more evident in the last one, but the creaminess is more evident in this one. The orange is still there, but I get the most distinct condensed milk off this one. They're very, very creamy and very, very, very sweet.
It's actually a struggle that when you get a peated whiskey and you have a sweet, soft, creamy note to it, those kind of cancel each other out a little on my head. But at the very least, a peat cancels out the creaminess, so I can't always pick one when the other is present.
No, it's creaminess, and it's a very milky creaminess on this one as well, which the more Amrut I taste, the more I find is quite a tell for that whiskey.
Ooh. There's some peat, but it's still an alarmingly, arrestingly sweet whiskey. The orange flavour is there, but it's transformed into more of a sherbet or a candied peel sweetness.
No, orange. Actually, if you want to go all the way specific, orange chocolate chip ice cream, which could well be something you only get in New Zealand. It is kind of a weird flavour now that I say it out loud, but orange chocolate chip ice cream. The orange flavour is there, but it's a sweeter, and it was a sweet, ripe, almost overripe orange in the last one that we did, if you haven't seen that one, the Amrut single malt. This time it's so sweet it's almost going into an artificial orange, like an orange confectionery, and specifically in this case orange ice cream, that sort of very, very sweet but very, very creamy orange.
And then a little bit of that milk chocolate sweet or cocoa-iness.
It's... Whew. The peat on there, it's really only evident once the other flavours have died down. It's not the primary flavour by any means. I think it's just, it's not 100% gentle, just at the back of the palate. That heat really comes through. I'm going to give it a wee bit of water.
The water has exacerbated the peat on the nose for me.
Water usually does. You'll find that if you've got a peaty whiskey and it just is not peat enough for you, bang a bit of water in, and 9 times out of 10, that will really inflame any peated characters that's
but
in
it
there.
has softened the rest of the peated characters. This has exploded into a marmalade-y orange goo of a whiskey. Imagine like an orange cream-filled chocolate.
Yeah, that's cut the creaminess back for me somewhat. Made it a little fruitier, juicier. I can't really tell which I liked more, but I can say it's quite markedly different with the addition of that water, which is often the case for an unchill filtered 50% whiskey. That's getting very, very close to cask strength, especially when you consider the elevated evaporation rate. They probably don't spend a lot of time above 50%. They rapidly drop into the 40s as they got older. But really pretty pleasing, I think. It's difficult to know really what you would call this. Whether you call this an Indian whiskey or who knows what you call it really, an Indian collaboration whiskey, I'm not sure, because of course it was completely distilled in India. So in terms of distillery character, in terms of maturation character, it's all 100% Indian whiskey. It's really only that 25% barley that they brought over from Scotland, which makes it not an Indian single malt. So who knows whether that makes a lot of difference or not. I think probably less difference than more, especially the similarities this shares with the Amrut single malt, the one we tried earlier. They're sort of entry level.
And besides, if you take a Spanish fortified wine cask over to Scotland, put whiskey in it for 20 years, and you made it Scotch whiskey, then surely you can take a little bit of barley grown in Scotland, use it for an Indian whiskey, and have still very much an Indian whiskey.
Well, you couldn't have a Scotch whiskey if you got your barley from overseas. I think I'd have to look up the things, but
it's got to be local.
There's probably slightly less stringent over in India. Most things are, but the whiskey certainly is not. This is pretty welcoming stuff here, and like I said with the previous one, it's not supremely cerebral. or nuanced, but it is very moorish. It's very, very pleasing to drink. And even more so, as a high-strength whiskey, it would really like a bit of ice on a hot day. It would be a really, really good climate for it there. These are certainly whiskies built to drink rather than think about in any extraneous capacity, which is, if you are drinking them, to enjoy. That's usually quite a good thing. It's not every day that you want to drag out your pad of tasting notes and make a job out of the whole thing to get the most out of your dram. So, no, this one, really the only challenge I have here is whether to rate it higher or lower than the last one, which I believe I gave a 78, or whether I rate it exactly the same. And that's where I'm trending, I think. It's different to the other one, but I think it's good and, well, it's not bad at all. It's good and bad in the same way. So I might stick with my score for that one. The peat there is not strong enough to, in my opinion, make it a dramatically different whiskey. So that's going to stay at a 78 for me. What do you think?
Well, I'm well impressed by this one. Normally, I'm a less peated whiskey fan. In this case, you've got two whiskies. The two whiskies we've tried most recently. The main difference has been the addition of some peat. And in this case, for me, that peat adds something to it rather than detracting from the other flavours. So this one I rate an 87. We get up into exceptional whiskey territory here, and it's a peated whiskey, but I'm really enjoying the addition of the peat, its contribution to the conversation.
Much more of an investment than the entry level, or is that more or less the same price?
Well, these miniature bottles, which I got because it was a convenient way to sample a range, were more or less identically priced, so it's hard to evaluate. But I believe they're about on par for full-size grown-up bottles in the store.
Okay, oh, well, something to keep an eye out for maybe if you're interested in that sort of thing, or you just want to taste something a little bit new and different. At any rate, we will be next episode getting on to the 100% Indian peated malt, and that one I'm quite interested to see. So hopefully you are too, because it's coming up next in the pipe. Sludger.